In our number 10 spot, we have Finding Nemo, the 5 Stages of Grief. A large community on Reddit was shocked to hear of one person's theory about the infamous Disney movie Finding Nemo. The user concluded that the movie was demonstrating the 5 stages of grief. The theory is that Nemo actually died with his siblings and mother, and that Marlin imagines a single egg surviving, demonstrating the first stage of denial, where he refused to accept that the horrific event happened. Then it becomes anger when Nemo does anything even remotely dangerous, then moves into bargaining, which Marlin does quite frequently on his quest to find Nemo. Then he eventually feels despair when he becomes ready to give up on the search, and then comes acceptance, where he finally is at peace and learns to not obsess over Nemo. I wouldn't put it past Disney to have at least developed the idea from this starting point. This theory feels pretty accurate to me. If you're liking this video so far, don't forget to smash that like button, as it will really help us out. In our number 9 spot, we have the Little Mermaid Hunter. In the original Little Mermaid, we learn that Ariel has a mother, but we never learn what happened to her until the 2008 movie The Little Mermaid: Ariel's Beginning. That is when we find out that Ariel's mother Athena was killed by a pirate ship, which is why King Triton hates humans. Well, perhaps you may have heard of another Disney tale with pirates called Peter Pan, and in this tale, Captain Hook, the villain of the story, is the captain of a pirate ship. We also see a group of mermaids in Peter Pan at Mermaid's Lagoon, and one of them looks an awful lot like Ariel, and she is even wearing a gold crown, probably the queen. So that of course has led to the theory that it was Captain Hook's ship that killed Ariel's mother, and therefore Captain Hook killed her. That one blew my mind. In our number 8 spot, we have the Frozen Wisdom. I don't need to pray for this theory to be real or not, because it's awesome and it just deserved an honorable mention. People are convinced that the writers of Frozen 2 may have perhaps gone to a lot of therapy in their time, or worked with psychologists to help write the film, because the film is filled with the most amount of wisdom. The type of wisdom you only hear from your therapist. Just do the next right thing, Anna sings as she makes the horrible realization that her sister Elsa and her friend Olaf have passed away. Anna sings about the grief that she is feeling and describes a heaviness that only people that have truly suffered from depression would understand. She goes on to coach herself to do the next right thing, take one step at a time. The best piece of advice you could give someone when they're in the thick of it all. In another case, the people of Arendelle have to evacuate, and after the chaos, Olaf lets all of the young ones play with him and stick icicles in him. He says to them, "We call this controlling what you can when things feel out of control." Another wonderful piece of advice. In our number 7 spot, we have Peter Pan the Psychopath. Now we all know that Neverland is a place where you never have to grow up and you can be a kid forever. And that's all Peter wants for his friends, whether you're a lost boy or a darling. Sure, fun and games all day sounds amazing, but what if you get tired of childhood and decide it's time to grow up? Well, this theory suggests that Peter doesn't take too kindly to adults, even if they started off as friends. In fact, he hates adults so much that he wants to kill them. There are few adults in the movie, the main ones we see being Captain Hook and the crew of the Jolly Roger, and we know how much Peter hates them, so what if the Lost Boys decided it's time to become lost men? Well, following this theory, Peter kills any of the Lost Boys who try to grow up and finds new ones to take their place, so he has friends to play with forever. Captain Hook was actually one of the Lost Boys in the past and learned the truth of who or what Peter is and escapes, rescuing others as he does, and they grow up into the crew. Ooh, this is why Hook hates Pan so much, so maybe Hook wasn't the villain after all. In our number 6 spot, we have a scorned lover. Ooh, this is a juicy fan theory that honestly feels like whomever came up with it must have also known the pain of being betrayed. The theory is around the movie The Beauty and the Beast, and the theory goes that the witch or enchantress that had created the curse that turned the prince into the beast and all of his royal courtiers into what are usually inanimate objects did so because she was a lover scorned. She and the beast were former lovers, and and he dismissed her once he got bored of her, which is something that royals were known to do in the past. The courtiers also would have treated her badly because they are loyal to the prince, so she placed a curse on them to teach them a lesson about respecting women. I see it. It makes more sense than a witch trapping the whole house just because the prince was prideful. There was clearly a deeper lesson afoot. In our number 5 spot, we have Eeyore's origin. Eeyore, everyone's favorite depressed donkey. While everyone in the 100-acre wood is usually pretty carefree and happy, Eeyore seems to always be in a bad mood, and I would be too if my tail kept getting lost or stolen and my house collapsed all the time. But some theorists think that there is a more sinister reason for the gloomy nature. But for that, we need to go all the way back to the 1940s movie Pinocchio. In the film, our puppet protagonist becomes a real boy, and after some wild adventuring, he is rewarded with a trip to Pleasure Island, a land where you can do anything you want and no grown-ups can stop you. But there is a curse placed on the island, and anyone who indulges is turned into a donkey. And we see in the movie that many of the donkeys can still talk. So the theory suggests that Eeyore was once a real boy, and he made the mistake of going to Pleasure Island and was cursed to take his more furry form. But it seems he managed to escape to the safety of the 100-acre wood, and now he lives out the rest of his days longing to regain his lost humanity. In our number 4 spot, we have Moana died. This is yet another very interesting and thought out theory around the movie Moana. In the beginning of the movie, Moana is on her boat stuck in a thunderstorm when the boat was struck by lightning. It is theorized that she died on the boat, which is most likely what would happen to any living being. The theory is expanded to state that Moana's spirit is completing the quest for the rest of the journey, and that is why she only meets gods and spirits the rest of the way. She is on their plane of existence. Then the theorist went on to state that after she finishes her quest, her spirit goes back into her body, and that is when she goes back to her island. Ooh, I bet you that some of these Reddit theorists are really just Disney employees, just, revealing secrets that they could only reveal anonymously. In our number 3 spot, we have The Fly. In the movie The Emperor's New Groove, Yzma has all sorts of potions to turn people into any animal you can think of, and she turns Kuzco into a llama. But I'm sure this isn't the only time she's done something like this. While most of the animals in the movie can't be understood by humans, like the squirrel only being able to communicate to Kronk through squeaks and gestures, there are obviously animals that can talk. Kuzco as the llama, Yzma as a cat, and there is one other strange example that throws the whole world of the film for a loop: the fly stuck in the spider's web. While walking in the forest, Kuzco sees a fly trapped in a web, and it is yelling out for help, but it's devoured quickly. Now, while this is an obvious reference to the 1958's The Fly, it also begs the question of who else has Yzma turned into animals. Was this one of Kuzco's once loyal subjects? And are there other jungle creatures who used to be humans out there? Let's hope they at least got to be better ones than a fly. In our number 2 spot, we have the evil trolls. Okay, here's another Frozen theory for you. What if Prince Hans wasn't actually evil? What if he was manipulated by magic? A lot of fans online thought that Prince Hans, who had a plot twist of being the overarching villain of the story, was a little out of left field. He was seemingly so good for most of the story, and then all of a sudden he was evil. Well, one Reddit user had a very good theory on this. The trolls, who are a part of Kristoff's family, have some very rare magic, and as they have Kristoff's best interests at heart, perhaps they used magic to change Anna and Hans's path and turn Hans evil so that Kristoff could end up with Anna. Arguably, it's probably for the best, as she actually had a friendship with Kristoff, and all she knew about Prince Hans was that they had a few things in common, like chocolate and sandwiches. Not a solid basis for a lasting relationship, but still, perhaps the trolls altered Anna and Prince Hans's path, and they are the true villains of the story. And finally, we reach our number 1 spot, Walt's mom. Walt Disney, of course. Ever wonder why none of the princesses or main characters in Disney movies seem to have mothers, or at least ones who are still alive? I mean, Cinderella, Bambi, Ariel, Belle, Jasmine, the list goes on and on. Well, some think that this is actually related to a terrible tragedy in the Disney family. In 1937, Walt and his brother Roy bought their parents a house with their newfound success, a dream for anyone. But unfortunately, this would be a terrible mistake. One day, their mother Flora called Walt to complain that their furnace was leaking gas. Walt sent some folks from the studio over to fix it, and they they did, or so they thought. The next morning, the housekeeper returned to find Mr. and Mrs. Disney unconscious and dragged them out into the front lawn. Their father was taken to a hospital and survived, but unfortunately their mother passed away at the scene. This tragedy was well known by those who worked at the studio, and many thought that it affected the stories they told going forward, that Walt was so traumatized that he passed the trauma onto the characters in the films as a way to move on himself. Either way, it's interesting to look into the man who created an empire.
Starting off this countdown, we have the Smellitizer. Disneyland sees about 18 million guests per year. Disney World sees about 58 million guests per year. That is an insane amount of people. Now, what if I told you that Disneyland mind controls its guests? I wish I was making this up, but I'm not. So Disney uses a device known as the Smellitizer. Basically, it's a device used to pump fumes throughout the park. For example, at the main entrance, they pump out the smell of popcorn to entice you to buy some. In candy shops or ice cream parlors, it will smell sweet like vanilla. They also do this to make their rides more immersive. Like at the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, it will smell like wet wood and sea salt. They are literally controlling what you smell. If that's not a form of mind control, then tell me what is. In our 9th spot, we have the monorail. So at Disney World in Florida, they have a public transit system known as the monorail. Basically, it allows guests to travel free between locations associated with Disney. However, in 2009, a 21-year-old monorail driver lost his life while on the job. He was transporting the last batch of guests for the night when another monorail came speeding towards him. They got into a head-on crash that took his life. After investigating the issue, it was discovered that the crash was entirely Disney's fault. They violated a number of safety protocols and even got fined for this. Coming in at number 8, we have the People Mover. The People Mover ride was a transport attraction that opened up at Tomorrowland at Disneyland, California in 1967. Basically, you would board a small train that would take you on a ride above Tomorrowland from above. However, a month after the ride opened, a 16-year-old boy tripped and fell onto the track. The oncoming train crushed him and dragged his body for a few hundred feet before stopping. That was just a month after opening. But sadly, it's not the only accident that happened. In 1972, a teen fell 30 feet to the ground from the tracks. As a result, she broke her arm, hip, and pelvis. She ended up suing Disney. Then in 1980, another male was crushed and killed by this ride. Over the years, there have been tons of lawsuits from people who have gotten injured on this ride. In our 7th spot, we have the injuries. The Disney mascot actors go through a lot. And I mean a lot. Not only do they have to wear those heavy costumes in the heat, but they also have to deal with whiny children and a bunch of Karens. But what you may not know is that Disney mascots often get seriously injured while on duty. A woman playing Mickey Mouse suffered a bad neck injury after a guest kept patting her head, which caused the head to fall down and strain her neck. The costumes themselves weigh around 47 pounds. They are blamed for at least 282 injuries. Not only that, but they are often touched inappropriately by the guests. A lot of workers have filed police reports because guests would grope or touch them inappropriately. It's not the kids though, it's the adults. A Disney princess had a 51-year-old man grab her breasts. He was arrested and then charged with battery. In another case, the actor portraying Donald Duck got grabbed inappropriately in certain areas by an older woman. Those poor mascots go through so much. Making our way down the list, number 6, we have the creepers. It's scary, but a park full of children attracts the wrong kind of people. Over the years, Disney has had a real problem with predators at the park. And I don't know what kind of background checks that Disney is doing on their employees, but obviously they aren't thorough enough. Because over the years, a number of park employees have been arrested after being inappropriate with the park guests. Since 2002, 42 employees have been arrested because of this. That's way too many people. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the freaky business. So apparently a lot of people like to get it on at Disney World. Author Leonard Kinsey highlights this in the book The Dark Side of Disney. Basically, he describes the truth about Disney and exposes all their dirty little secrets. So apparently a lot of people have in the companion restroom. It's a single room with a toilet and sink for anyone that wants a little extra privacy, or for anyone that wants to get a little spicy. Like really, come on guys, keep it together. Apparently a lot of people try to get it on during rides as well. If you're caught though, you get the boot right away. You get the boot and no booty. In our 4th spot, we have the chef suite. So in 2010 at Disneyland Paris, 2 chefs committed. Apparently, the working conditions weren't the best. One of the chefs apparently became depressed after the food at the park switched from freshly made to frozen. His note read, and I quote, "I don't want to work for Mickey anymore." This seems like an urban legend, but I swear I'm not making this up. The other chef apparently took his own life because of humiliating treatment at work. Then in 2013, another employee tried to take his own life by setting himself on fire. That's crazy. Coming in at number 3, we have the deaths. So Disney claims that no one has ever died at their park. Clearly that's not true. Like, I just finished talking about all the people that have died at their parks. So it turns out what Disney does is when someone does die at the park, employees have to remove the dead body from the property before pronouncing them dead. That means no one technically died at the park, only outside of the park's gates or wherever they were. They do this so that all the families feel safe coming there. I mean, the park must be super safe if no deaths have ever occurred there. Very sneaky, Disney. Very sneaky. Moving on at number 2, we have the workers' deaths. So that's not the only crazy rule that Disney has. They also have a rule as to what should happen if a mascot or character actor gets injured or dies there. No matter what happens, they have to stay in character. Once they are out of the public's eye, that's when they can receive medical attention. For example, one worker was told before accepting a job as Water Goofy on a Disney cruise, he had to agree that in an event he started drowning, he had to be carried away before lifeguards remove his costume and perform CPR. So he could literally be dying in the costume and need medical attention right away, but Disney won't allow it. And in our number 1 spot, we have the cover-up. This is by far one of the biggest cover-ups made by Disney. So on December 24th, 1998, 2 park guests and an employee were involved in a bad accident on the sailing ship Columbia Ride. A heavy metal cleat became loose and hit the guests and employee. One of the guests died and his wife was hospitalized. But Disney failed to notify the police. When they were called to the scene, Disney cleaned up the mess as quickly as possible before the police arrived. They also refused to let in outside medical personnel. They were afraid that this would frighten the park guests. 2 things they shouldn't have done. They got a hefty fine as a result of this and were taken to court.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the missing mothers. Have you ever noticed that a lot of characters in Disney movies don't have mothers? Or if they do, something bad happens to the mothers in the film? Like Belle from Beauty and the Beast, or Snow White, or Bambi, which is truly one of the most tragic examples that I can think of. I never really noticed this trend until it was pointed out to me, but it's honestly very common in Disney movies and had me wondering, what was up with that? Well, there is a theory that this morbid trend is due to the fact that Walt Disney himself had bought a home for his parents to move into. After moving in, the furnace had a leak and it unfortunately affected both of his parents and actually led to his mother passing away. An extremely tragic situation that Walt refused to talk about after. Many people believe that he felt guilty for the incident since he purchased the house for them, but of course it was not his fault at all. It's very possible that this real life trauma he experienced just ended up bleeding into his work. In our number 9 spot today, we have Walt's last words. In 1966, Walt Disney was diagnosed with lung cancer after being a lifelong smoker, and he passed away not too long after. We always hear famous last words from people that are either inspiring or just downright terrifying, but Walt's last words were just strange. Walt was unfortunately unable to speak due to the condition of his lungs, so his last words were actually written. The last words were Kurt Russell. I wish I could tell you this super interesting story about Kurt, but he was actually just a child actor at the time of Walt's passing. Kurt did voice work, but he also starred in a few movies. Unfortunately, no one really knows why Kurt was on Walt's mind in his final moments, and unless Kurt knows something that he isn't telling us, we will probably never know. In our number 8 spot today, we have a Toy Story connection. Before I dive into this one, guys, please don't forget to hit the thumbs up button if you're enjoying the video so far, because it really helps
helps us out. Toy Story is an absolute classic that is well loved by many. I mean, what kid hasn't imagined their toys coming to life behind closed doors? It honestly is the dream. One little known thing about Toy Story though is its creepy connection. In the Toy Story movies there are quite a few subtle references to the movie The Shining. Definitely not what I would have expected. I'm not exactly sure why this connection exists, but it does. In the scene where Woody and Buzz Lightyear are trying to escape from Sid's house, that carpet is the same one as the one in the Overlook Hotel from The Shining. Also, the number 237, which is a terrifying room in The Shining, is repeatedly seen throughout the Toy Story franchise. There are even more connections as well, such as the way the scoring for the movie is set up, which was inspired by, you guessed it, The Shining. And in Toy Story 3, the Sunnyside Daycare has an intercom that is an animated duplicate of the one used by Wendy Torrance, and just a few feet away is a tissue box that has the same pattern as the carpet I mentioned before. It's a lot of connections, and I just wish I knew why. In our number 7 spot today we have this Disneyland invasion. In 1970, 750 hippies went to Disneyland and took over the Wilderness Fort. They passed out joints to other guests at the park and marched down Main Street singing a version of Zippity Doo-Dah that they had altered in order to be about the Vietnam War. Other people at the park began to sing America the Beautiful and tried to overpower them with their singing. This of course all got out of control, and eventually police in riot gear had to show up in order to defuse the situation and to keep it peaceful. Luckily everything ended non-violently, and this is actually one of the only times that outside police ever had to handle a security issue at the parks. But this instance led to quite a rule at Disney parks. There was a strict dress code implemented that prevented long-haired hippies from being allowed to enter the parks. This is obviously not a great rule, and of course has since been abolished, because that would just be insane if that rule was still around in 2021. In our number 6 spot today we have Hell's Bells. In 1929, Disney made a short film called Hell's Bells that was a part of the Silly Symphonies. While the Silly Symphonies seems like a fun, great time, Hell's Bells was a little less than silly or fun. It was basically just a short about hell, and the characters in it had different names, but they definitely depicted some of the most loved Disney characters. Honestly, the whole thing is pretty terrifying and really dark, and just totally off-brand for Disney. Satan and his demons have a wild party, and he feeds one of the demons to a character called Cerberus, who I'm pretty sure is actually the underworld version of Goofy. All in all, I think it's better that we just leave this one in 1929 where it belongs. In our number 5 spot today we have this Disneyland Dangerous Metal. When Disneyland was being built in 1955, one of the main metals that was used was lead. This is insane since it's poisonous to humans. It just seems like someone would have caught this fatal flaw. Research has shown that prolonged exposure to lead can impact the reproductive and nervous system in really terrible ways, and it can also even cause cancer. If you're just taking a ride or two, it's probably not the worst thing in the world, but working at the park, especially if you're on the maintenance team, this could definitely have some extremely harmful side effects. Eventually testing was done that found that the Peter Pan ride, the Haunted Mansion, Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, and the Sword in the Stone statue, as well as even more, were containing high levels of lead. I'm not exactly sure what steps Disney has taken, if any, to correct this issue, but I do know that complaints were still being filed in 2011, so it'll be interesting to see if this was fixed 10 years later. In our number 4 spot today we have the Disney World deaths. Disney World is the happiest place on earth, or so they say, so it is always shocking to hear of anything bad happening there. Well, Disney World has been around for 56 years, so some less than great things are bound to happen. Unfortunately, at least 14 people have died at Disney World over its course. The reasons span from rides to accidents to pre-existing health conditions. Some of the people have been guests, while others have been backstage workers or cast members. It's definitely not the type of thing that we are used to hearing about a Disney park, since they of course like to keep their image as squeaky clean as possible, but hey, there are some things that are just just unavoidable. In our number 3 spot today, we have this woman's rejection letter. The 1930s weren't exactly an ideal time to be a woman for a multitude of reasons, and one of them just happens to be the difficulty in finding employment. Women who applied to be animators at Disney Studios constantly found themselves being turned down because of the fact that they were women. One woman named Miss Frances Brewer was one of the many women who applied for a position, and this is the rejection letter that she received from Disney Studios. Women do not do any of the creative work in connection with preparing the cartoons for the screen, as that work is performed by young men. For this reason, girls are not considered for the training school. To qualify for the only work open to women, one must be well grounded in the use of pen and ink, and also of watercolor. The work to be done consists of tracing the characters on clear celluloid sheets with India ink and filling in the tracings on the reverse side with paint according to directions. With how far we've come from this time in America, it just feels so shocking to know that this was once the norm for women. In our number 2 spot today, we have this goldfish incident. Finding Nemo is an amazing movie, and no one can convince me otherwise, but one thing I didn't know is the effect that it caused on goldfish everywhere. I know Nemo isn't a goldfish, but more people are buying goldfish as pets than they are buying clownfish. After the 2003 film came out, when kids saw the movie, they thought that by flushing their fish down the toilet, they would be sending them back to the ocean where they would be happier. It's truly noble in theory, but obviously most fish can't survive the flush, and if they do, they're headed to the sewage system, which will then end up taking them out regardless. It's truly the sweetest thing that all of these kids wanted to reunite their pets with their long lost family, but who would have thought a Disney classic would lead to goldfish genocide? In our number 1 spot today, we have the problematic history. Most Disney movies instantly become popular because they are usually great, and having them come from a reputable source definitely doesn't hurt. There is one Disney movie from a while ago that you might have never heard of though, and it is called Song of the South. The movie follows a small boy who goes to visit his grandmother's plantation, where he meets a black man who they call Uncle Remus, who is a former slave, who was played by a man named James Baskett. Yep, that is unfortunately a real movie that was made by Disney, and the reason you may have never heard of it is because it is obviously super racist. What's worse is that the movie actually won an Academy Award for Best Song in 1947 for Zippity Doo Dah. It's safe to say that this movie has since been buried, and it should definitely stay that way.
Kicking off the list at number 10, the Whispering Statue. Well, this doesn't sound terrifying at all. Okay. Over at Disneyland, Florida, there's a bronze statue of Goofy. He's 10 feet tall, he's shiny, he's sitting in the sun all day long, so he's probably boiling hot to touch. Well, rumor has it, if you sit next to Goofy on that bench for long enough, the guy might start whispering sweet nothings in your magic Mickey Mouse ears that you bought for $79. This statue can be found near the Lady and the Tramp restaurant over in Tony's Town. Number 9. Caution, do not pull rope. Do not pull the rope. Don't do it. Normally when we see a sign that tells us not to do something, we listen, especially if it's near Indiana Jones' adventure ride at Disneyland, Florida. You don't want to be running away from any rolling boulders, you know what I mean? Can't be poking around ancient cursed artifacts, my friend. This one's waiting for you in the queue area, so next time you're in line and you're bored out of your mind, maybe do pull a rope or two, see what happens. After the first tug, you'll hear a voice. A nearby excavator will tell you to cut it out. It's kind of funny, whatever. If you pull it a second time, you'll hear loud noises, crashes, and a big bang. It's actually pretty alarming. Apparently it scares a lot of kids, which is pretty fun. And it's all your fault. That's right, all because you pulled that rope. Better keep that line moving. Sounds like a heap of hurt waiting for you. Number 8. Musical manholes. Disneyland is full of magic. There's animatronics that move on their own, statues that whisper in your ears when you don't expect it. There's music in the air and also in the ground, apparently. In Disneyland, Florida's Toontown, there's a big fountain with Mickey leading an orchestra. Now these instruments aren't doing much, that is, until you stand on a tune hole cover. That's when corresponding instruments start to fire up. So if you have enough friends or family members, you could start an entire orchestra for guests at the park, and they would have no idea it's because of you and your tune manhole cover. There's probably many of you who don't know this and accidentally stepped on a tuba cover. You're like, what was that? Number 7, hidden Mickeys. When Walt Disney himself said, "I only hope that we never lose sight of one thing, that it was all started by a mouse," I got to thinking, which mouse? Was it Stuart Little? Who was he talking about here? Was he talking about the mouse with an ear on its back? That's always a fun one. Or Mickey Mouse, of course. The iconic 3 circles that puts your imagination to the test. If you're visiting Disney Orlando anytime soon, keep an eye open for the hundreds of Mickey Mouse symbols hidden around the park. Yep, they're hidden in the walls, the floors, paintings. In total, there's rumored to be over 1,000 hidden Mickey Mouse logos. Number 6. No more dragons. Disney's Animal Kingdom was originally supposed to have even more animal goodness. Can you believe that? Even more magic. The park originally planned for 3 types of areas, 3 different themes. Animals that are real but now extinct, and animals that are mythological, like unicorns or even dragons per se. Evidence of this can be found looking directly at you when you enter the park. Right in the Animal Kingdom sign in front of the park, you can see a dragon representing the never finished Beastly Kingdom. That'd have been a lot of fun, Beastly Kingdom. You're like, is it real? I don't think it's real. Number 5, Cinderella Suite. Cinderella's castle at Disney World is the main attraction. Without that castle, it would just be a regular theme park. Of course, the castle is a smaller scale than a real medieval one, obviously, so it's a surprise to find out that there's actually a real hidden suite in that castle. And yes, it's quite magical. To get there, you'll need to take a pumpkin carriage elevator. How magical is that? And then in the actual suite, you'll find 2 beds and a pull-out couch. Yeah, nothing more enchanting than a pull-out couch. That's fun. That'll probably be mine if I went with friends for sure. There's stained glass windows, a fireplace to keep you warm in Orlando, Florida. But I almost forgot the most important detail. You need to be invited. Of course, you can't just waltz in there. It's not an Airbnb. Get out of here. You have to win a contest in order to even get in the building. To be honest, I don't think I'd want to spend the night here. It doesn't look cozy at all. Looks kind of scary and boring. Pull-out couches? Also, no way. Number 4. Underground tunnels. In a place like Disney, there has to be room for employees to take a breather, right? That much time in character, all those high fives. I get it. I've done mascot work for a theme park. It's hot, it's sweaty, it's a lot of yuck going on inside that mask, right? It's not the easiest job. But they're human too. They need to take breaks, they need to clock in and clock out. Where does that magic happen? Well, this needs to be away from the public eye, right? You can't have people watch as Mickey takes his head off to go for a smoke. No way, obviously. So instead, Disney has hidden underground tunnels to move around the park without worrying about staying in character or getting caught in large crowds. During the early park days, Walt Disney himself saw a cowboy from Frontierland walk through Tomorrowland to get to his post. And it just didn't make any sense, you know? It took the magic out of the air. More than fair. So in turn, he made 392,000 square feet of underground tunnels, and that ought to do the trick. Yeah, and also, yes, they look creepy. There's zero magic in these tunnels. Number 3, teacups. The teacup ride is one of the best hidden gems in the park. The Fantasyland Spin Fest is worth waiting for if you know which cups to run for. And yes, it turns out it does matter. You always see kids running, you're like, does it matter? They're all the same. No, it definitely does matter. I was wrong my whole life. There's 18 teacups in total, and the speeds all vary. Here's a hot tip. The orange teacup with diamonds and the purple teacup, they go the fastest. All right, so pass that on. Pass it on to your family and friends. There you go. There's 2 teacups with hearts, and yes, they might be lovely, but these ones are the slower teacups. So if your date is like, oh, these ones look romantic, don't do it, okay? We gotta go to this one. We gotta go fast today. We gotta whip. That wheel in the center, we're not here for fun, okay? We're here for speed. We're clocking in numbers today. We're hitting G-forces. Number 2, family of the day. If you're a family of early birds and you also love waiting outside of amusement parks, well, have I got the place for you, my friends? Here we go. Every morning there's a loud opening ceremony known as the rope drop. This happens when the park first opens, right in the morning. The only way to get picked, according to insiders, is to have matching Disney gear and to arrive early and show energy. Nice. So no crying at 7 a.m., okay? This is Disneyland, okay? This is magical. Don't ruin our day. The family gets a tour of Main Street before it opens to the general public, and you get to walk around with Mickey and the gang all the way to the Magic Kingdom train station. And then they get to see the morning crowd all arrive and gather below. Major Willy Wonka vibes going on with this one. I don't know if I'd want a morning tour with all the mascots as they're waking up, yawning, giving me high fives. I'm all set. And finally, number 1, the spitting camel. If you thought Gold-Tooth Goofy was fascinating, well, buckle up, Imagineers. In 2019, this secret location was actually removed. And honestly, good thing. Gone, but certainly not forgotten. That's why I'm here. Since 2001, the grounds of Magic Carpets of Aladdin were refreshing, to say the least. In Adventureland and Magic Kingdom, you'd be walking near the attraction when all of a sudden water would hit you in the face from somewhere. From something. Yeah, it turns out that camel that sits in front of the ride, he would sometimes squirt water out of its mouth randomly into some poor soul's retina. How lovely is that? Yeah, some lukewarm Florida pipe water hitting you directly in the pupil. How magical is that? There you go, grab a hat on the way out. As of 2019, the spinning camel has since been removed, but fear not, there's still the other camel. Let's just hope this one doesn't gain the ability to, project swamp water at passerbyers. That would be nice if it just stayed put.